Welcome in. Welcome in. Tap the screen. Share the live. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you for the heart knee. This is an info session to Intro to Holistic Medicine. We'll recap what we learned on Wednesday, and we will discuss a little bit just logistics, housekeeping, making sure everyone stays engaged, and looking forward to the information that we're going to go over tomorrow. Yes, I do. Always. Thank you so much. I appreciate the love and support. Get started just a few minutes. Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate you. Thank you. Definitely gets me out on the FYP. Keeps us rolling. Thank you for the tabs. Thank you for the shares. All right. Let's see. Good evening, everyone, everywhere. My name is Dr. Erica Steele. I'm a board-certified naturopathic doctor. I hold 7 degrees in my field, all in the natural healthcare space. I like to say that I went to school, so you don't have to. And the reason I say that is because of this. I have a frog in my throat. I'll take up my water. So the reason I say this is because in one profession, as a for instance, right, you get one perspective, right? And in a model or a system that is separate, right, where there is all of these separate parts, it behooves the powers that be, I guess, not for these systems to communicate with each other, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean that the body is one entire system, right? And there's a lot of complexities to the system. And so it's very strategic to then have a system where you go to one person, which is a primary care, and then that primary care then sends you to this person, and then that person is a specialist, right? So when you go to school, right, you go to school and learn to become a primary care, or you learn to become a specialist, and those are the tracks that you go down. However, what happens is that when you go down that specific track, if I'm a hammer, the only thing I'm going to see is a nail, right? Because I'm trained to see the nail. And so what happens in education is when we stick in one area, we get really kind of tunnel vision. And so, having those different, aspects and looking at this one system from all of these different perspectives is really, again, how we have a holistic view and a holistic life and a holistic thinking. It's not reductionist where we reduce everything down to one or two things. Life has a lot of complexity and a lot of nuance to it. But that's all by design, right, through suppression. So if you've been following along in our Intro to Holistic Medicine class, we have been really discussing, the role of Rockefeller, the role of Carnegie, the role of Flexner and the Flexner Report, and really the suppression of natural and holistic practices, right? Because natural and holistic practices predate our conventional system, right? So when we look at, right, what is holistic, we're getting into that conversation now, but we have to understand, again, the system that we're currently operating in, which is our current healthcare system, okay? And so because when we go into a more holistic lifestyle or a more holistic view, or even a holistic medical practice, we look at things very differently than the body is looked at, or even the spirit or the emotional aspect or the mental aspect, or any aspect of the body. We look at it very different because a conventional practice, right, your conventional medical model, your healthcare system, that doctor is trained on a specific standard of care, and that specific standard of care limits their model really to the germ theory. And so the treatments are sanitation, antibiotics, pharmaceuticals, procedures, or surgical interventions. That is what they're trained on in their original medical school education. So if you've had a chance to review any of the materials, or even look at the video on the Intro to Holistic Medicine playlist on YouTube, not on TikTok. I haven't been able to put it on TikTok yet, but I will. It goes over, it's about a 12-minute video. And I put that video on there for two reasons, and we'll talk about that. So the beginning of the video talks about, the early 1900s, talks about the medical monopoly. Also in the email that I just sent out to you guys as well, there's two videos in there, like a 1-minute video and then probably about like a 3 or 4 minute video. And again, these are just different references that go over the medical monopoly and what happened, because at that time, again, all the different types of doctors still used naturally occurring substances because that's all we had, right? So, there wasn't this whole healthcare system that there is actually today. In fact, at the time, right, many doctors were, worked for the patients. It was very much communal. It was very much everybody's working together. Yes, there were medical doctors. Yes, there were naturopaths. Yes, there were homeopaths. Yes, there were chiropractors. There was all these different, doctors, professions, even, more doctors of color and coming into the profession. And so at the time, again, Rockefeller, made a deal with a German company. And I don't remember the German company's name off the top of my head, but he, in essence, purchased petroleum, mass amounts of petroleum post-World War II, and then used the petroleum-based substances and combined them with naturally occurring substances and created the pharmaceutical industry. So then from there, he then sent out Flexner and, to write the Flexner Report to, in essence, discredit all of the naturally occurring holistic practices. So all of those were considered unscientific, were considered quackery, were considered, all of the things that we still hear today, because that's why we talked about superiority bias and we talked about confirmation bias. And because it's never, ever, 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 ever been about the science. It's been about monopolizing healthcare, right? And it's about creating systems and structures to pretty much oppress people from their own natural ability to heal themselves. So the body innately has an ability to heal itself if we give it the right environment, okay? So there are challenges to creating the right environment. So what's an environment? An environment is an internal environment and an external environment. So the things that separate the internal environment from the external environment are the skin, right? That's a natural barrier, okay? Then you have the digestive system, right? So food going in. Then you have air, respiratory system, your lungs, okay? And so you have all of these things, and your body requires water, right? There are these very basic things that, again, the healthcare system has pretty much indoctrinated everybody into fear that there's something going to happen always, and not necessarily spending a lot of time teaching people about their bodies, how their bodies actually work, because there is a very there's a very severe deficit in that, right, understanding. And it all goes back to the medical school education. It goes back to how the medical school education is structured. It is structured in a very strategic way. And so again, we go more in depth into that. Definitely watch the Intro to Holistic Medicine playlist. There is a video that I put on there that I want you guys to watch. Again, it's about a 12-minute video, and it goes over all of the history, all of the names, places, etc. I just want you to get a real overview, because I want to really engage in a discussion about this, because there is a long-standing belief, right, that there's this gold standard, right? And the gold standard is mired in these words like peer review, right? These are standards that have been created. But then when we peel back the layers, those standards were, number one, created for a specific reason, which was to subjugate and oppress, holistic and natural practices. So that was one thing. But another thing, it was also designed as a profit center, which we already see is working, okay? And so how we know it's working is because what is driving our healthcare cost is not, a huge outbreaks of things, right? It's more of our metabolic issues, which are more lifestyle driven, right? And so what is a part of our environment and what's a part of our lifestyle? Our air, our food, our water, right? These very basic things that unfortunately, if you are not educated in these areas, you may not know, how to look up your municipality's water supply and what actually they put in your water chemical, your water supply, and what you may need to filter out and why you need to filter that out, and the impact of that, and the data and where you find that information, So there's so much in the public health world that if people knew, really would empower them more. And I saw that a lot during the pandemic, because there was a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of misinformation, and unfortunately a lot of people didn't get the information that they needed in the time that they needed, right? And so stress, fear, call it what you will, is like gasoline on any fire. And we all know that, or at least some of us know, that all diseases begin and end from breakdowns in the metabolism. So why do I say that, right? What does that mean? So breakdowns in the metabolism, let's look at it. Let's look at the metabolism in general in three parts, right? Digestion, right? So what you're putting in. So think about your car, the gasoline that you're putting in your car, right? That's digestion. And then you have your metabolism, so going through the liver, going through the small intestines, the Krebs cycle, all of that, right? So that's all actually your metabolism. It's all the breaking down of your macronutrients, which are your proteins, fats, and carbs, into your micronutrients, which are more your vitamins and your minerals, right? So that's more of like the engine in your car, right? So now the gas is going in, the engine is there. And now the last part is oxidative phosphorylation, or the electron transport chain. And that's more like, the exhaust pipe, but it's done in 4 sections, and that's that detoxification. So energy in, right? Then it goes into the, engine, and it's used for all the different things like the immune system and the hormonal system and the neurological system and all the various different functions that we have in the body. And then whatever waste is left over, that is what is eliminated. However, if you have, let's say, a food supply that's demineralized, or you have a diet that is subpar, or you're not getting a variety of nutrients, maybe you're just, really picky and you're only eating certain things, right? What does is, now you begin to go nutrient deficient, right? And as you become more nutrient deficient, now you just don't have the energy in the body, right? You don't have the B complexes, you don't have the methionine, you don't have various different nutrients, maybe amino acids, that your body actually needs to perform these functions. So what happens is then the metabolism begins to slow down, right? And as the metabolism begins to slow down, the body begins to hold on to toxicity because it doesn't even have that to eliminate. So now the body starts to what we call bioaccumulate, so begin to accumulate with toxins, right? And so now we've got a lack of nutrients in the body, so a lack of energy in the body, and an overabundance of toxicity in the system. Now the body is not in balance, right? So now what happens, right? Dis-ease, right? Imbalance, and now we begin to function of the organs begin to become impaired, and eventually what happens is that the body then develops a pathology or a disease process that then can either be studied or managed anatomically or structurally or functionally. So that is kind of how the process goes. And so our way of how we approach our health has to change. Again, health is a state that we create. It is not an absence or an absence of symptom or disease, right? So oftentimes in my practice, I ask my patients, how's your health, right? And the first thing they say is, I'm not on any medication. I don't have any diagnoses. So that is not your actual health. That is disease and disease managed. Sorry, I was talking to. Anyway, that's disease and disease management. Okay, so we have to really be mindful of the conversation that we're having. Okay, because when we're having a conversation about health, we're talking about the state that we are creating with our health. Meaning, how much water am I drinking? How much movement? How many steps am I getting? How much protein am I getting? How much calories am I taking in? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because that's a part of what creates a state. It's all those metrics that we look at, which can be monitored and reviewed and that sort of thing. And so, we don't want to just, guess, we want to test. So when we're building awareness with our health and we're building more of a holistic lifestyle, we're actually going more internal. So if we're going more internal, right, we're also allowing ourselves to actually see. So a good example of this is like weighing myself every day, right? So now I have to have a certain mindset to do that. So if I've had difficulty, let's say with weight, or difficulty with, eating disorders or any sort of kind of eating behaviors, then I'm not necessarily going to go to that one, right? But since I haven't had that, I look at my weight every day. And what that does is it goes, okay, how was I doing with my protein to fat ratio the previous day, right? Because sometimes I'll go, oh, you know what? I'm going to fill up on fat, right? Even if it's healthy fat, and then I'm not going to eat enough protein. And how do I know that? Because I've tracked it enough to know my patterns, right? So a lot of times what we say is oh, how much water do you drink? Oh, I drink plenty of water, right? Well, how do you know? How do you know you drink plenty of water unless you track it and you're consistently tracking it? So we're beginning to build more awareness to actually what creates our health, rather than the system that was built really as a profit center and really to drive sickness and illness and those sorts of things. And one of the videos that's in the email that I sent you, actually at the end, they began to realize that the petroleum-based substances were creating various different conditions, cancer being one of them. And then as a response, they started the American Cancer Association to now bury the information. So, data is really important, and data is very much on the chopping block, I think, in many cases right now. And so understanding your data from a very basic perspective. So I start from a super basic perspective and teach you just simple things, right? Like, so in this class, we're going to go over, subjective data. So I'm going to teach you all about nutrition. We're going to explore nutrition deficiencies and actually recognize how many symptoms are associated with nutrient deficiencies that you may not be aware of. So we'll have fun with that. I think that'll be a huge eye-opener. So we'll go through that, and then that'll be our subjective data. And then our objective data, which is, something outside of me, something outside of you, we're going to look at pH levels. So we're going to look at your salivary pH, which shows us actually how you're digesting. It shows us about your buffering system. Most people are going to come in very acidic, right, around 5, 5.7, that sort of thing. But we really need to be, much higher. So we need to be around 6.8, 7.2, that sort of thing. And so functionally, right, so our buffering system can function. What is our buffering system? Our ability to digest, assimilate, not back things up into our kidneys, our liver, etc. So again, how we look at the body is very different than this diagnose and manage model, which would say, oh, that's acid reflux, or that's, GERD, or that's, whatever label that they would put on it, but it's same functionally still the same, meaning it's still functionally the same. So hopefully that makes sense. So we'll get into salivary pHs, we'll get into urinary pHs, we'll get into heart rate, and then we'll really apply it to various modalities. So what are modalities? They're treatments. So again, we talked about what is in, the conventional medical model, what's based off of the germ theory, right? There's only a handful of treatments that are available that are part of the gold standard of practice, and those would be pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, surgeries, procedures. I think I covered it. Vaccinations. Those are really the only treatment modalities, right? Whereas in holistic medicine, we have various different types of not only measurements of data, which we'll discover, but also we have various different treatment modalities. And the reason we do is because, again, the complexity of the body, which is why we're moving to more personalized medicine, where it's based off of the individual. It's not generalized healthcare, which can be very dangerous when you're dealing with so many different people with so many different nuances. And what we learned in my MPH is also too, we have to take into consideration cultural backgrounds, learning in genetics and methyl-genetics, understanding the impact of people's genetic SNPs and the instabilities around that, and how certain treatments can trigger other issues if not being aware. And so there's a lot of complexity. And when you separate right out where you've got one person over here studying the heart, and you've got one person over here studying the kidneys, and you've got one person over here studying the skin, all of these systems work in the same body, right? But all of these different providers are not speaking to each other. And so that was done all by design, right, to again manage diseases that spring up in these various organ systems, right? And so when we step into more of a holistic viewpoint, right, and more holistic medicine, we don't look at the body like it's all these separate pieces. Instead, we're looking at the body like it's one unit. So we realize that when I make a decision over here, it's going to impact something over here, right? So if I say, okay, I'm going to make a decision with the liver, right? I know that that's going to impact the kidneys, right? Or if I make an impact, let's say with the small intestines, right? I know that that's probably also going to impact the skin, right? Or even sometimes the hormonal system, just depending, right? Or even the neurological system, right? So there's a relationship, right, that each organ system has to another, right, that we look at. And also we look at making sure that those systems are structurally sound. So again, now we're thinking about therapeutic order. So in holistic medicine, we have what's called therapeutic order. And I believe they have it in conventional medicine as well. And so therapeutic order is knowing what to do and what to use when. And so we're going to talk a lot more about that because, again, never about the science, which we'll go over a little bit tomorrow. I've got some great graphs and things to kind of show you guys that, from my education and various different certifications that I've taken, just looking at, again, the data, right? So I always wanted to see something outside of myself so that I could get past any sort of bias and there could be a control, because that's a scientific process, right? So person comes in, they have a complaint, you listen to their complaint, you then have a hypothesis, which is just your educated guess with all the information that you have at the time, and then you're there to prove or disprove that, right, with an objective analysis, something outside of me, something outside of you, right, to kind of see what comes up. Then we can formulate a plan, and then from there we can continue to track the plan now that we have a baseline, right? So that's actually how, we do it. However, when you put people in, giant groupings, and then, the studies only are looking at a certain portion of the population and not looking at the entire portion of the population. And, they're fast tracked and restricted. And, there's lots of different, corruptions that exist, right? And I'm not saying every single one, but there's definitely the integrity issues with the data exist. And so if I need healthcare today, if I need healthcare now, I also cannot wait until the powers that be kind of get their act together and figure it out. And we really saw, the stress on the healthcare system, during the pandemic. We saw just the information blackouts. We saw the constant changing of information every single day, very, very chaotic. And so what does that do to healthcare in general is it makes the providers very chaotic. Well, if they're very chaotic, prefrontal cortex, amygdala, prefrontal cortex is not going to fire. So now we're not going to be thinking outside of the box. But again, if we're trained to only operate off of standard of care, right? But there is no standard of care and we're not trained to do anything else. Now we're kind of in no man's land, right? And unfortunately, because of a lack of understanding of how health works, right? It's not just about disease, right? We've learned this a million times in various different places. Dr. Bruce Lipton with epigenetics, it's the environment. Antoine Béchamp, the terrain theory, it's the environment. And we understand now, and we can scientifically and historically get why the healthcare system is so counter to that, right? However, it does take some level of acceptance to recognize that this is how this system was created. So, I think that, thank you for the heart me. I think that there's a lot of grief that happens, with that, because we are conditioned to trust the system that inevitably was not necessarily designed to support and help. While it wasn't designed for that, doesn't mean that, it hasn't helped people, and it's helped many, many people, myself included, right? However, we have to have a balance, right? We can't come from, our indigenous backgrounds and how we lived our lives for centuries to now be expected to adapt into a system that has been dangerous, that's tested on us, that doesn't really listen to our concerns and is failing. The Commonwealth Fund study just came out just last year, over 50%, I think 52% subpar care, worse in the South, right? And so, and also too, we look at New Jersey and we look at, the C-sections and how they were profiting off of that, significant amounts of C-sections, and specifically targeted to Black women who were pregnant. And so I think it was up 25% higher than white counterparts that were being given C-sections that didn't need them, okay? And so here's what happens, right? Impact, right? So a C-section, you're not going into, thank you, you're not actually going into, the birthing canal, so you're not able to get that bacteria, right, which that coats your immune system, okay? So that is the beginning part. Your immune system develops between the first 2,000 days of life. So that is from conception, right, into 2 years old, right? So all of that, microbiology, right, also what the mother is eating, what she's consuming, all of the bacteria within her gut, that's all building immunity. So we don't want McDonald's and all the rest of that stuff, right? Building children. That's just not healthy. And so, we want to be conscious and present to that and keep our bodies healthy, love ourselves and love our temples. And then as, we're building our immune systems and the immune systems of our babies, right? Making sure at least, obviously there are things that happen. However, there is a big business of birthing. And so when you inhibit the immune system just by having to do that unnecessary C-section, now that child is more susceptible. And then what happens is, hey, Baba, then boom, right? They want to give injectables, which again inhibit the immune system. There was a pediatrician, I can't remember his name, it's been so long, but he was in private practice, and he actually studied the his children, the children that chose to vaccinate and the children that did it. When my daughter was born, we looked at the actual data, and considering the mental health issues that we had very significant in the family and the instabilities around the nervous system, we made a decision not to, right? And it was based off of data and information. And at the time, the doctor was very impressed and was very collaborative with me. And we made an objective, decision. It wasn't something that was based off of emotion or coercion. We worked as partners in that, looking at everything and me wanting to be a responsible parent, right? However, when I kind of, got into, family practice, part of it was really servicing the families that were being rejected, kicked out, or worse, were being injured, right? And so those families a lot of times don't have as much of a voice and are often shamed and shunned and that sort of thing, even in their own doctor's offices. So, again, there are things that I have seen that I cannot unsee, that I can't turn the other way and pretend like they don't exist. When you've actually seen these things, worked with these people, and been focused in these areas for far too long, you stand 10 toes down on everything, because the ramifications. This is not just, stats on a board. These are people's lives, which also prompted me to write my column for Psychology Today, Bring Care Back to Healthcare, because again, I saw that there was such a lack of care, even just proper informed consent, explaining to a person what their diagnosis is, what their treatment options are available, what alternative options are available, and being given the space to make that decision, right? And unfortunately, patient autonomy is not present. Instead, it's replaced with coercion and force and manipulation. And I'm going to call, this, person CPS and all of the things, right, on good people who are literally just trying to keep their children safe. Having to hold mothers' hands who, they're and having these injectables, literally the next day, seizures, fevers, loss of eye contact, I can go on and on and on. Like, these are not just isolated. These are not, just, based off of fantasy. These are actually real people. And so this really looks at public health in a very different way, because we're looking at what the responsibility is for the patient to be informed and to be educated, and also what the system's responsibility is to educate from an unbiased perspective. Unfortunately, when you have special interest and you have lobbying and you have the various different financial incentives that are in place, health insurance premiums, all of these different components. It's not just one thing, right? So it's not just the legislation. It's not just the hospital system. It's not just the insurance. It's not just the clinical delivery. It's not just the administration and the lack of efficiency. It's not just one thing, which is why it's very easy when you're not in the system and you haven't also learned all these different aspects of the system to say that, what I'm saying is radical, right? But when you've actually worked in these different sectors of the system, trying to make change, trying to push forward, recognizing that No, this is just the way the system is built. So either the solution is to keep banging your head up against a wall to eventually, hopefully, something, knocks, or you say, you know what, I'm gonna create a better way, and I'm gonna create a system that makes sense. And that system is more empowering people. It's educating people on what they can do proactively, not reactively. So you understand therapeutic order. So you understand, okay, you know what? It's September, October. The weather here gets cold, not here, but in other places, right? So my immune system maybe has been a little bit shaky, or I have little ones running around. So I need to make sure that I start protecting my immune system in that, September, October. I need to add, maybe 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C. I need to do 25 milligrams of zinc. Maybe I need to go get these extra, wipes to wipe the doors or whatnot. These are things that, consciously knowing what to do, right? Most people don't, right? They kind of do a little bit of this, and they do a little bit of that, and they dabble in this, and but there's no structure and there's no system because they don't know it, because they haven't trained in it, right? And you cannot take an online class and just learn how to heal the body, right? You can't just go and read a couple books and learn this complex system of a human body. If you try to do that, what happens is that you end up harming a lot of people, okay? Because again, it's not just about, the conventional model doesn't work in the holistic system. So you can't go, oh, okay, so you've got this disease, you've got this condition, oh, let me go look up, oh, okay, these herbs and these, supplements, and these, here, go take this, right? Well, here's what happens if you do that, right? There's all these mechanisms of action that you're firing off all at the same time biochemically, right? And so if you're doing too much too fast, you can't isolate out anything, so you have no idea what went wrong in your study. Zero. Because your study was too complex to begin with. So you have to start slow. And in therapeutic order, we start with the foundations, right? How are you, right? If you're going to bring your car into the shop, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to check your basics, your oil, your filter. They're going to pretty much test everything to make sure all the basics are running. And that's what a lot of people don't even realize are the basics. They assume. They disassociate, they pretend, they deny, they avoid, they oppress. I'm sure on some level somewhere, right, you may know that you may not be drinking half your body weight in ounces in water, right? And just maybe if you started to drink half your body weight in ounces in water, maybe not at first, maybe you had to build up to it, but then maybe you sustained it for, let's say, 2 weeks, a month, I guarantee you're going to start to feel different, right? Why? Because the body, you are literally a giant houseplant. You need lots of water, lots of minerals, lots of nutrients, lots of sun, that is what we need, right? But unfortunately, we're trained in our system to look at ourselves as broken, as fallible, as needing fixing. And so when we have that mindset of looking at our body as always broken and disempowered about what to do to fix it, and then we need to go run and, to somebody else to help save us, right? And I'm not saying that there's not space and time and reason and all the things, but again, there's therapeutic order, which we'll go over, right? So I'm going to build those foundational pieces, make sure that's good. I'm going to build any weak areas, right? So let's say if my lungs are affected, or, if let's say I sprain my knee, I'm going to do something regional for that and topical for that. So knowing, what makes the most sense. Is it systemic, meaning I'm going to take something orally, or am I going to put something on a particular area because that's more bioavailable, right? So bioavailability matters. It's not just about, and it's also not just about taking anything, right? Because order matters, right? One thing is going to help support another thing. But also, too, there's qualities on these things, right? Not every supplement, just because it's a supplement, doesn't mean that it's great, right? Just because they talk like a holistic provider doesn't mean that they are truly a holistic provider, right? There is a lot of charlatans, definitely, in the field, just as much as there's a lot of, conventional doctors that are closed off to, the things that I'm saying, right? Because of their superiority bias and their confirmation bias. So it goes both ways. And so my thing is bringing integrity back to healthcare, right? Because we can, number one, I want to get the legislation out of healthcare, but unfortunately, we're all bedfellows now that the 14th Amendment is just, tossed up like, like a, I don't even know, a baton, I guess, we'll see who catches it, and so unfortunately, we need to learn, right, about our bodies. Fortunately, I think it's a fortunate thing. I love learning about my body, if you ask me, right? And so I think the unfortunate part is those people who think that there's somebody that's going to save them, some doctor, some scientist, some CDC, some FDA, some major entity that's going to come and make it better. They're not coming. And so the sooner that you realize that, the sooner that physician, heal thyself, and you've got to learn how to maintain this thing called a body, even though you weren't given a manuscript, you weren't given a how-to, and so hopefully what I'm doing here, teaching you intro to holistic medicine, having a safe community that you can come to, ask questions. I definitely want to see more engagement for those people that are in the class. Still time to register if you would like. You can click the link in the bio, scroll down. There's a form, intro to holistic medicine. Just register there. And then once you get into the community, I'll let you in within 24-48. Once you get into the community, there's all the replays that I put for the courses. So if you missed Wednesday, the replay is already in there. Yay, I know. So, so you could go ahead and look at it. So this week it's really, about understanding like where we are in healthcare and what's going on. And, I rip the Band-Aid off, clutch your pearls, grab your blankies, your binkies, whatever you need, to accept the fact that this system is not helping people. It is harming people. Third leading cause of death, right? And these are things, as you will look at that video that I put on the playlist, doctors who speak out against the system, right, are shunned, are blackballed. So I am not tied to and affiliated with any system, and I don't even live in the U.S. anymore. So, there's not this fear of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Although I've always kind of toed the line anyway, right? Of, speaking truth to power, because people need to know the information. It's not about profiting off of people's ignorance. In fact, the very opposite. When you give people the information, when you educate people, when you motivate people, you inspire people, people remember you, right? And so maybe a patient doesn't need me today, maybe they don't need me tomorrow, but 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right? I've built a long-standing career off of integrity and doing what's right? And so obviously you come up against a lot of resistance, right? Because this system is not designed for so many things, right? And so many people, including a Black woman, and so especially one that's counter to, this oppressive system. But unfortunately, I saw early on with my mother and my mother's care, I just saw there was huge stopgaps. And it wasn't until really, her psychologist told her to go back to her roots, right, that it really changed the trajectory of her healthcare and her healing, right? And to have somebody at that time who had the forethought to go, maybe you should go back to, and I also mentioned in the discussion as well that, when we've been separated from our original ancestry and our original practices and our original roots and colonized into a certain system, right? There is a deep grief and there is a deep sadness that happens, not to mention all the other, aspects of it, right? But there is a connection, that we have when we connect in to ourselves, to our center, to nature. Nature has a totally different meaning and a different essence because we're watching nature for clues, right? That's how we know ways to cleanse the body. That's how we know biodynamic farming. That's how we know lots of different things with the body, seasons for growth for food, right? And so there's a lot of different things with nature that's already built in, that's already in the flow, but because we're living in very colonized, westernized societies, we're very disconnected. And so we have to now create that connection, for ourselves in order to not be too far out of balance into this, westernized world. So we looked at, I remember there were some studies, I've looked at so many studies, so you'll forgive me, but I remember the good ones. So there's this one study that we looked at when we looked at, I think it was the Japanese, and we looked at kind of over time what was occurring with Japanese culture and their health, specifically the more westernized they got, because they emulate the US and all the different things, right? So McDonald's and all that, right? So, and even though it's quote unquote a healthier version, right, beginning to adopt that kind of westernized, fast-paced culture, we could see obviously health was diminishing as a result. Remember, health is a state, right? And so if your gallbladder's filling up, with gallstones because you're eating way too much fat than what you're burning off, or, you're not eating enough protein, so your body doesn't have those amino acids in order to repair and heal itself, right? Or, you're deficient in CoQ10 or vitamin C or magnesium or any of the things, right, that are really important for so many different enzymatic processes in the body. And so, understanding, okay, I need, nutrients, from here, or I need nutrients from here, right? And so getting out of this mindset, like even still, I'll give you an example. A lot of people think, oh, orange juice, right? Vitamin C. In fact, red pepper, right, is 3 times as much vitamin C as orange juice. But we've all been conditioned to think that, right? And so I'm sure if we looked back to how that was started, it's something in marketing. I'm sure, some, Trapa Sunkist, sort of brand had some sort of, something that happened, and, boom, away we go. And so there's a lot of, deception in marketing, and also with the pharmaceutical industry. Now they have a ability to market to you low efficacy products that they know that the doctors are not going to refer to their patients. So they're able to now market to you drugs that are not necessarily going to work properly, but they need to kind of clear off the shelves. So that's a problem, when it's constantly put in your head, or your face, ask your doctor about this, ask your doctor about that, ask your doctor about that. And you're thinking, why is my doctor not asking me about that? Why is my doctor not, really supporting me? Because that's what a doctor is supposed to do, is we're kind of thinking in this way, physician, heal thyself. We think about ourselves in a container, right? And so if you're doing this course for yourself, which hopefully you are, you should be anyway, is, not should, but, you know what I mean. So the container, right? You're in a container and you're observing yourself, right? That's how I was able to catch that, right? Is that I'm observing myself. I'm not judging myself. I'm just observing myself, right? I'm observing my humanity, right? I'm observing and I'm present to what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I'm doing. I'm embodied, right? So that would be what we call embodied. When I'm consciously thinking, consciously feeling, consciously being present with you, right? A lot of people are not like that, right? They're checked out, they're disassociated, they're shut down, because in order to be fully embodied, you have to work with your emotional wounding. And a lot of people are running from themselves and they don't want to look at their emotions. Well, if you don't want to look at your emotions, the throat is a two-way channel. You're either going to shove it down, right? Or you're going to speak it out. And if you're not speaking it out, what's going to happen, right? And so people have a difficult time then digesting how they feel. So then again, we're building up, constipation, digestion, gurgling, acid reflux, etc., right? And it's not a dietary thing, although it is, but it's actually more causative, a mental and an emotional and a trauma that wasn't dealt with from the past, right? So until we address that, the eating pattern is not going to change. Until we address that, the habits are not going to change. Until we address that, the mental aspects are not going to change. So these are nuances that I began to observe when I was working with people, right? That I just couldn't ignore, there's a lot of gaslighting that goes on, right? All over the place, but especially in medicine, and we are supposed to be scientists. We are supposed to observe things. We're supposed to, always be wrong, hopefully, and so if we're constantly challenging, right, what we think, we're able to innovate. We're able to move forward. When we get into this very rigid, I know everything, superior, and it's confirmed already, there's no new information, even though the information is flawed and biased, there's nothing new. Don't look, keep walking, keep going. That's my problem, is I was one of those kids that was like, why? That doesn't make sense, And so because of my curiosity, it's led me down this very long road that I'll try to organize and synthesize and get to you in a very actionable format through this class. And so definitely jump into the discussions. I want to kind of see you thinking. That's why I ask tons of questions. I know I don't mean to bombard you with all the questions, but they're really designed to get you thinking. So we talked also about like ethics, even in holistic practices, and what that looks like. We talked about informed consent. We talked about suppression of holistic practices. So we definitely talked about a lot of different concepts, scope of practice, patient autonomy. So definitely get in there. I tried to kind of summarize the readings in several different perspectives, from video to quick notes to more longer form things. So if you haven't done already, please complete that learning experience survey so I know a little bit more about the formats that work for you, whether they're evergreen videos or workbooks or whatnot. I see some of you have also downloaded your health tracking app. If you haven't, it's okay. We're going to do it all together in a couple weeks. And so when we go over that, but for the people that did, go ahead and just kind of start working through tracking your water and just kind of getting more present and conscious. Before I go, I want to show you guys the communities just so that you're aware of what is going on. All right, so when you log in, you will have, obviously we talked about kind of choice and intention. So there's 3 communities that you can choose from. If your intention is more to go into holistic health coaching, you choose that. If your intention is more into a holistic lifestyle, there's that. If you want more focus on Afro-Indigenous lens, there is that community. You will apply, answer the questions, please, and then I accept those in and then kind of triage you in and tell you, to introduce yourself, ask you to introduce yourself. Once you get in there, there are a couple different tabs. So this is from the Holistic Health Coaching. So there's a tab for events. So when I go live, that'll actually be in there. Also, too, there's a discussion tab, and this discussion tab is for learning discussions. Under learnings, this is also where the core course is. So you open it up and it goes to all of the replay videos, and also will go to just the various bulletin points and the readings and all of the things that you'll need to see. So these are the 3 courses. They look similar. There's a little bit of some differences between. So you kind of choose your path, and then we go from there, just so I know what it is you want to learn. Then there is, again, the events tab. It kind of flew by. I don't know why. But I will go through on Sunday and put the events for the week in there. Notice our morning flow is Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's kind of always consistent. And then if I go, like if I do a day live, I didn't do one here because I kind of I sent an email out to you guys before. It'll be in the green. So if let's say if I'm going to go live in the afternoon and do kind of like one of these little mini teachings, it'll show up there and it'll send you an email. And then the live class is just on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So next week I'll put that in there, and I'll also put the topics and what we're discussing. We get into subjective data next week, so look out for that. And then again, make sure that you engage with the discussions. So on the home screen, I put all of the mini lessons to look at and engage in those discussions there. And then under the learnings tab, there is a course shell for the intro to holistic medicine. So you'll just open that up and then you'll see everything in there. And I think that is all. So thank you guys so much for attending. I hope to see you around in all of the various places. And I hope that you also connect deeper in with yourself and that you live a holistic lifestyle for you and your family. I think I used to say, let's see, thank you for helping. What is it? I can't even remember what it was. It's been so long. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I'll see you guys.